This tutorial is going to explore how you can use Google Sheets to generate two types of maps. In this case, the Choropleth map and the proportional symbols map. And I'll use this tutorial not just to show you how to do that, and you should do your own copy of each and insert it into your classroom document, but I'll also explore the strengths and weaknesses of the two respective techniques as we go through each one. So we've got some data here, in this case, data on all of South America's countries. And we're looking at the total population size of the South American countries, as well as the infant mortality rate per thousand births for each of those countries. And we've decided we would like to map this data to discover whether there are patterns, as well as allowing us to highlight the areas where the highest values are and the lowest, which is why at the end of the day we would look to map any data. Now, let's look at the first of the two techniques, the Choropleth map, also known as the shading density map. And the first thing you need to do is enter the area that you would like your data to be represented at. In this case, we are looking at countries and the area being South America, and the specific data values that we've got. And you would look to highlight in your Google Sheet the columns of data that you're looking to map. So in this case, I've not just highlighted the countries and the populations, but I've also highlighted the title of that column there, total population, because that will ensure that it appears as a title above our key. The next step is to select the Insert Chart button on the Google Sheet, which is either available from one of the buttons here or from the Insert Chart from the menu tab Insert. So I'll use that one there. Now, Google will automatically default to one of the chosen normally graphical presentation techniques. We are interested in mapping this data. So the first thing we do is we go to the chart editor and we change it from column chart, and we scroll down the choices until we get to the map. And in this case, there's two options. We are going to look for this geochart, which happens to be a Choropleth map, or a shading density map, as it's more commonly known. Now, we could have had the whole world data. We could have mapped it all if we had wanted and had the time to do that, if we were looking at the global pattern of populations. In this case, we're just looking at South America. So we probably want to remove the rest of the world from our map. So the next step to do is to go to the Customize part of the chart editor and select that. And we've got two buttons here. We're going to start with the Geo button because we are going to change our region to South America. And what that then does is it removes all of the other regions of the world, and we can just see South America. We can also hover above each of them now, because this is one of the strengths of digital mapping versus analog mapping, just doing on paper, is that we can interactively access our data this way. Now, this is not a shading density map yet. It's just a color map with a key linked to the colors. To make it a true shading density, we need to select one color scheme and go for a light shade of that color to a dark shade for the maximum, including one for the mid and a color for no values. So if we were, for example, it's always useful to go with a color that shows a very distinct variation in colors from light to dark. So I'm going to take blue in this example, but I could go with anything. Now, my middle range countries, I'm going to go for a middle range blue. And I can play around with that just to make it distinctly darker. And then I'm going to go for a high range for my darkest, which I could select with that. Now you can play around with these color ranges just to allow you to see what the variation looks like, until what you end up with is a very clear dark color representing one or two of your highest value countries. And also you would be looking to have just one or two in your lightest. Okay. Now, what we now have done is a Choropleth. It's great for data where you've gathered averages across a whole area, or totals for a whole area, in this case total population. And it allows you to see very stark contrasts between neighbours. We also get to see patterns, so we can see these top three in this area are all quite low. One of the weaknesses, however, of this technique is that each category, or each country in this case, it's not very clear to see exactly how much it is unless I hover over it. Now, if this was a paper-based one and I looked at this color here, I wouldn't know whether it was 4 million, or in this case 44 million people, or in Colombia's case 49, because the two colors look almost identical. So it's not giving me precise values, which makes it maybe less than useful. Okay. Right, that's a couple of the advantages and disadvantages of choropleth mapping. I could change this for a different type of map, but I've got a different set of data. So what you're going to want to do is copy this map across. You can choose your own colors, by the way, and you can also bring in a background color for something if you're interested, for changing the sea, for example. And use, just play around with the map settings slightly. There isn't much optionality in how to do this, but you've got a little bit. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm now going to look to map my second data set, but I'm going to use a different mapping technique. I'm going to use the Insert Chart button, and this time I want to do the proportional symbols function. So let's just scroll down and have a look at that. So that's the second of the two mapping options, the GeoChart with markers. And once again, you'll see I've been defaulted to the whole map. So what I want to do first of all is I want to customize it. And I'm going to go to the geo and I'm going to select just South America. Okay. Now, unfortunately, we don't get the choice to choose the size of our circles in the actual Google Sheets spreadsheet. It might be desirable, for example, to be able to make our larger circles appear much larger. So we really emphasize the countries that have high, or in this very high infant mortality rates. So in this case, Guyana is losing 24 babies for every 1,000 born. Sometimes having very large circles can be a problem, though, because if this circle was very large, it might actually conceal the two smaller ones behind it. Okay, so there might be virtue in having circles of this size. Now, the color is actually largely not important in proportional symbols mapping. I could just go with the same color for all of them, or I could indeed alter my colors if I wanted to have color as a theme. You need a very accurate key. This is a color themed key, but a true proportional symbols key would actually show you the diameter of a circle and what value it represented. And therefore, I could actually use a ruler to measure how wide my circle was and compare that with the key, which would then give me the value. So this isn't taking proportional symbols mapping to its full extent. It does quite nicely show you patterns, though. That's its key strength. It allows me to compare countries that are neighbors or patterns within the top of South America versus the bottom. It can be quite difficult to see very small values and know what their actual size is because they're almost too small to measure. And that's especially a problem if you have countries that are very small compared to very large. If I show you what that looks like in South America's map, why that's a problem, if I turn this into a proportional symbols map, if I go to the setup and change it in the editor to proportional symbols, we can see why that is a problem. Right, can you go ahead and make both of your maps, one proportional symbols, one choropleth, and insert them into your document?